Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are diving deep into two terms you hear all the time: ideal body weight and body mass index. We're going to get into the story behind these numbers and what they can, and maybe more importantly, what they can't tell us about our health.
Right. You've probably heard these terms thrown around by doctors, in the news, or maybe at the gym. But have you ever stopped to think about where they actually came from? What did they really measure? And what are they missing? Well, let's find out.
So, our story kicks off not with some big public health campaign, but with a simple and, as it turns out, a surprisingly tricky medical problem. How in the world do you figure out the ideal weight for a person?
Well, the first big swing at this came in 1974 from a guy named Ben J. Devine. And you know what's funny? His goal wasn't even about general health. He came up with the whole concept of ideal body weight for a very specific reason: to help doctors figure out the right dose for certain drugs. Turns out how your body processes them was linked more to this ideal weight than your actual total weight.
So, the U.S. National Library of Medicine basically defines it as the weight you'd expect for a healthy person based on things like their age, sex, and height. The whole idea was to use a formula to give you one single, clear number to aim for. And that was its big selling point, right? Its simplicity. It gave doctors a super straightforward formula to get a single target weight. But, as you can probably guess, that beautiful simplicity, well, it came with some pretty serious drawbacks.
Okay, so let's get into it. For its original purpose, IBW was a pretty good first step. But as people started using it for everything, it became super clear that it just wasn't the perfect tool for measuring a person's overall health. Yeah, the flaws really started to show. First off, it's just not universal. I mean, think about it. How can one single ideal weight apply to every single person, no matter their age, ethnicity, or health? It just can't. It's also way too rigid. It gives you one number, when we all know health is more of a range. And finally, it just didn't line up well with other health metrics, often getting it wrong for people who are particularly short or tall.
So, to get around these problems, the scientific community turned to a different tool. And this is the interesting part. It was a tool that had actually been sitting on the shelf for a long time, but was about to get a whole new lease on life.
Enter the body mass index, or BMI. This really shifts the whole focus. Instead of chasing one ideal number, BMI is all about quantifying your total tissue mass. We're talking muscle, fat, bone, the whole shebang, and looking at it in relation to your height. It's a much broader picture.
And get this, the history here is pretty wild. The formula itself was invented way back in the 1800s by a Belgian mathematician and sociologist named Quetelet. But he wasn't studying health. He was studying population statistics, and he called his work social physics. How cool is that?
So this formula just sat around for more than a century. It wasn't until an American scientist, Ansel Benjamin Keys, dusted it off, repurposed it for health studies, and gave it the name we all know today: the Body Mass Index, or BMI.
So this is how BMI gets used in the real world. The World Health Organization and other groups created these classifications, like this one here, which is specifically for Asian populations, that link BMI ranges to categories like underweight, normal, overweight, and obese. This became the new way to assess health risks across large populations.
Okay, so here's the crucial point. While BMI became the global standard and definitely fixed some of IBW's issues, it's not a perfect tool either, not by a long shot. It has its own very significant blind spots.
For example, and this is probably its biggest flaw, BMI can't tell the difference between muscle and fat. And since muscle is way denser than fat, a supermuscular athlete or a bodybuilder could easily get classified as overweight or even obese by BMI, even with incredibly low body fat.
And it works on the flip side too. For older adults, who might have lost a good bit of muscle mass over the years, which is a totally natural part of aging, BMI can actually underestimate their body fat percentage, and that could mean missing some potential health risks.
So when you boil it all down, context is everything. BMI is a useful screening tool, especially for looking at large groups of people, but it just doesn't tell the whole story for any one individual. It's not meant for pregnant women, for instance, and there's a completely different scale that's used for kids.
All of these blind spots have led to even more refinements and different methods. It just goes to show you that the search for a better, more nuanced way to measure our health is always ongoing.
And this has led to some pretty clever modifications. You've got things like BMI Prime, which just makes it easier to understand your BMI at a glance by comparing it to the upper healthy limit. There's also modified BMI, which brings in other health markers like serum albumin to create a more complete picture. And of course, there's that BMI for age percentile system that's made specifically for kids and teens. Which really brings us to the key takeaway from this whole story. From ideal body weight to BMI and all its variations, you see this constant effort to simplify our health into one single, easy-to-understand number. But maybe the real lesson is that our health is just too complex for that. These numbers are useful tools for sure, but they're just one part of a much bigger, much more complicated, and honestly, a deeply personal health picture.